It is now. Good evening. This is Levi. Welcome to the bootcamp one more time. This is a bootcamp on the foundations of Forex and commodities trading. Today we are making a small presentation on money. This is part of the course number 2 on online trading, where we are doing a preparatory series to help all students or anyone interested to get the foundation knowledge necessary to foundational knowledge necessary to understand the core concept of online trading, because the online trading takes place um, among participants that are trading a paper, a contract, a legal document called instrument. And the instrument is a representation of right to money. And that money is really covered under the 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 keyword called capital, which is why financial market exists anyway, to create capital and allow the capital to flow among participants so they can create services and good in the economy to grow the economy. Now, because everything evolves around money, whatever we are trading when it comes to financial instruments, they are counted in money, they are backed by money, and they are paid with money. And people collect profit or even recognize losses through money. So money is the keyword. That's why we'd like to first cover money. That's what this is about. So in the content, we're going to cover the disclaimer as always, and then opening statement, the topic of the day, and which is the money itself. I'm going to divide it into 3 parts: the cost of living, history of money, legal definition of money, actually 4 parts, and then functions of money. But the third and the fourth part can be combined into 3 really for quicker understanding. However, if you divide it in 4, that's also um, technically sound. Then I'll go over the conclusion. As far as the disclaimer, the course is presented by an academy, an online course program offered by the Renaissance Media Group LLC. As such, the course contains specific training materials that should only be regarded and be construed as personal opinions of the presenters, the staff, and or the teachers of the program in the Renaissance Media Group LLC. Something for you, the participant. Before deciding to attend, each participant should review the course description, contact us for additional information if needed at info@noacademy.com, and discuss with your qualified advisor or their qualified advisor if needed to determine whether this course is appropriate for his or her current financial situation. There's also some special considerations given the fact that we are training on Forex and commodity markets. On the matter of training programs related to Forex and commodities, by the way, this should also assume that we are also including Bitcoin in that fold. It should be noted that any contents pertaining to trading and investment are solely provided for educational purposes. Additionally, Forex and commodities markets are regarded historically as highly volatile due to their inherent speculative nature of their underlying asset class. As such, anyone interested in investing or trading in the Forex and commodities market should be ready to lose part or everything of their investment very quickly. No professional advice. We do not provide investment, financial, nor legal advice. Past performance does not guarantee future results. Now, as far as for the bootcamp, welcome. The title of the bootcamp is Foundations of Commodities and Forex Trading. In that bootcamp, we cover everything that is involved with commodities from a basic standpoint. We do the same for Forex trading. And under the commodities part, we also include a very healthy discussion about crypto trading. Especially the focus will be on Bitcoin. So there will be 10 courses. This is a lesson that is included in the course number 2 that you're watching today. In this program, you'll get an all-inclusive um, presentation that includes commodities, that is futures and options, and also Forex and cryptocurrency. When we say all-inclusive, we mean commodities, we talk about futures, options, Forex, we talk about the entire foundations of Forex, and in crypto trading, we will discuss spot trading and derivative trading in details. We will also spend some time on NFTs, but mainly we are going to be concerned with trading actual cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, to be very precise. Today's topic is money. This is the first of 3 other preparatory concepts that you need to learn if you haven't learned them yet. If you have, you can just skip them and go straight to the core knowledge of online trading. The thing we want to do is to establish a foundational understanding of money. Then we want to prepare you for the next point, which is to understand financial instruments, to understand trading against investment. And once you've completed those 3 foundations, you will be ready to learn the online trading course, which is the second half of that whole entire series. So when you take 3 foundations plus the core, it will take you 4 lessons, and those 4 lessons combined make the course online trading. So it's an online trading course, but with 4 different lessons into it. But don't be limited only to the 4 lessons. We will continue to post from time to time one-off courses that are providing deeper understanding. For example, once we are done with the issue of preparatory, we will also spend a little more time to post some articles as well. And when we are done with this whole course, we are planning on doing a one-off presentation on blockchain technology. It's just not it's not your main course, but it's to allow those who are interested to have the option to further their knowledge. Money. Let's talk about money. The main parts we want to talk about, the first will be the cost of living, meaning first we want to break down what is life and what does it cost to even be alive. And to stay alive, what does that mean? What do we say? What do we mean when we say basic life instincts? Like, what makes us do what we do in the first place, and where does that come from? And that course of life, what is it made of? I mean, how did we start with it, and from the beginning, how did that work out, and what's the origin of all that? And what's the requirement to really be alive and live? I mean, what does it take someone to actually live life, you know? And then I will go over the 6 human needs that I have literally borrowed from a great thinker, and I think it's right on point to kind of close out this section. And then we will now get into the history of money, the prehistorical period, the historical period, the modern time. And when we are done, I will go over some definition, which is the legal definition and the functions of money. This is divided into 2 sections really, but for quicker reading, I've put them into 1 section, which is the section of definition. Now let's talk about the cost of living. we are alive, but we all agree that everything, nothing is for free. Have you heard of that popular saying, nothing is for free? But if it's not for free, how much does it cost? I mean, and who pays for what, and who do we pay XYZ to, and for what reason do we pay? Do we have to pay? And where does that concept come from? And the money itself, where does all that come from? You know, understanding life in and by itself is the foundation of this whole experience. So why do we live, and what's life? And um, I've thought about this a lot from a biological standpoint, from sociology call standpoint, from a psychological standpoint, from a spiritual standpoint, without getting too religious, thinking about it from a philosophical standpoint. I thought of so many different ways you can try to define life. I didn't see one that will ever be 100% accurate because it's so vast and it involves so many people. Alone right now, just this at around this time right now, we have over 7 billion people with some sort of life they are experiencing at the same time right now as I'm making this video. So it would be not accurate for one single person to just say, I know what you or the other guy understands, and here is what it is. So it varies. But this definition is more like from a biological standpoint to make it simple, not to make it complete. That's not a complete definition. I've come up with that to kind of find a middle ground where most people can look at it and say, okay, yeah, let's start with that as a baseline. But feel free to add comments if you like to also bring insights on what you think life is. The way I see it from a biological, again, standpoint is the compound effects of biochemical processes found in microorganic systems that to ensure both their existence and survival. That's simple. It's the the group of effects or combined effects of all the biochemical processes. When I say biochemical, I'm talking about the metabolic pathway where you have four elements, generally speaking, the nitrogen, carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen, and they combine together to create more molecules. And then as you go as it goes to the digestive tracts, then it breaks down into smaller parts until it breaks down again into simple forms of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, a smaller molecules that are now reforming into new concept that will come back to the same carbohydrate for the most part. And then as that process repeats itself millions of times every minute, life takes place. You have soon your tissues are getting their fluids, vitamins, proteins are created, fibers are digested and then turn into new forms again, hydrocarbon molecules to feel all kind of functions in your body to allow your body to function to work properly. We can start from even growing your nail back after you cut them and go all the way into creating different substances that help regulate your mood and behavior. So we go from neurological system all the way down to your nails. And all of those functions are taking place instantly all the time as your body, your nervous system, your central nervous system is kind of like controlling a certain flow of things based on some pre-recorded message in your DNA that kind of control that function. And for as long as that function continue to operate in a way to ensure your existence and survival, we call that you're alive. And then we say there's life. However, when that process stops to happen or to renew itself, for instance, if you have a breakdown in that renewal, it's either you are dying or you are actually dead. You're done. Although your body might continue to operate some final processes, but these are not processes that will renew for the purpose of ensuring that you are there, but it's more like for you to continue to die or disappear. So in that way, I've said it's more like it's a process that you see that ensure that you are in existence or survival. Now that you exist and for you to survive, there's a lot of calling and things that you just want to do. And you might not even know where it comes from. It's just kind of like in your DNA. It's just like natural. Have you heard this? Like, it's just natural for me to just be that way. My mom was that way, or my father was that way. My uncle was that way. I got it from my uncle, or I got it from my grandmother, right? And that there was this kind of like heredity that provides us a work frame of how we behave, how we act to maintain a certain flow of habits, of actions that allow our system to continue to exist. For example, we we eat for our body to find the carbons or anything else, nutrients or anything else. And at times we just smell it and then it give us a big hunger that we didn't even have before. And that just triggers something in our mind that creates this urge for action. And these things can be interpreted based on who you study and what school you come from in psychology, whether you are more of a traditional school of thought where you're going to look at it more as an organic way, or whether you want to look at it more from a Fujian way. That's just gonna get more and more interesting as we try to explain how those urge comes from. But we can just think of basic life instincts as a few theories. Let's call the biological theories to understand how those instincts works. You have the survival instinct. Basically, it's more like an instinct that the biological theory is based on the premise that everything that we are has already been pre-programmed for the most part in our brain, and we just grow after we were born to achieve our full potential that was already in store. So we're not really making up a lot more than what was already pre-designed in the back of our brain. Then those instincts would be directing us into how we behave through our lifetime. And they are all done to attain these things. The first is to survive, the second is to reproduce, and the third is to seek for a higher purpose. It's called the religious instinct. And based on these three instincts, all men will create a set of behavioral pattern that will aim at achieving these three goals of the survival, reproduction, or religious attainment. However, Sigmund Freud looked at it from more from from an abstract standpoint, removing the biology into it. Sigmund Freud basically said there is no instinct. He went the other way. He went quite the opposite way and said no instinct exists. There was only drives. Drives means urges, and he sees drive as two parts. One part is creating the excitement, and then based on the excitement, it starts with the excitement, and the excitement creates and build up that we call the tension. And once that tension reaches a certain level, that tension needs to be released. And to be released, that tension will identify a certain object that will provide the subject the ability to either release that tension, or by failure to doing so, to suppress it. In that sense, Freud saw those drives as two types: eros for something erotic that has to do with basically pleasure, sex, and reproduction, and the other one is thanato that has more to do with destructions and death. But whether you believe biological theory, it makes more sense to you, of the Freudian theory, it makes more sense to you, or you want to mix them and make a third one, that's also, that has been done, where you can have an alternative that combine both. You can also consider the creationist, that is precisely those who believe in the Bible and Genesis. God created the world, and on the sixth day created man and women and rested. And these are very closely related to the biological theory, because creationists believe in procreation. That means it's in the Genesis 1st verse 28, when after God saw what he's created, he blessed them and he told them to go and fill the earth and procreate and all that great stuff. So that's Genesis 1st verse 28, which is to and dominate over everything. You will see a more of a similarity outside of the dominance when it comes to biology. Yeah, and then there have been so many other theories and even conspiracies as far as where we came from and what some people believe in, aliens from aliens stuff. So we're not here to debate these theories or what have you, just to give you an idea that overall it has been a very serious topic for discussion. But the life instinct, as we can see here on the board, is that there seems to be a general consensus, and the general consensus seems to be that we all exist in a place, and we were fit to exist where we are, and by design we want to preserve that, the fact that we exist because we were supposed to. And whether you believe in the biological, the creationist, or the Freudian, you can see that everybody agrees to the fact that there is some kind of phenomena, there's some kind of dynamics that comes with life that motivate, or if I should say, instruct or program how we behave, and those behavior becomes patterns that we carry for the rest of our life, and that defines what kind of things we need or not. That's what the point is. Now, because of those needs, speaking of, again, investigating the cost of living, because of those needs, of those basic instincts or drives or purpose that we have, it creates a certain flow of life where we start eating again for survival, or that object might become hunger, might become the tension, right? um, According to Freud, or according to biological theory, it would be for survival. Then I'm gonna eat. Now I feed myself, or I feed my babies, or my kids, or my people, so they can also continue to live. And without food, we've seen what happened to people. They get hungry, and hunger kill people, and literally. The second thing, we want sheltered, like a place where we can um, cover ourselves from imminent danger of outside threats or other conditions that are not agreeable to our well-being. Then we seek validation, meaning we want people to, not people per se, but peer, meaning or other species we identify as similar to us. We want them to at least acknowledge us. Sometimes you could do any harm to a man, he might not react. But if you ignore him or her, then there is a sense of loss or hurt, or, or, or inferiority, because you ignore me. And that means I don't matter. I don't have values. And then we seek that validation to renew that faith in us that we have some values. Then we create herding. We build herding mentality, meaning we pull together with people we recognize as similar to us. Like when we see someone was as old as us, we get together to talk. Or if we come from the same place and we recognize each other's accent, and then we are in social setting, we get together. So in order for us to maintain this similarities or identity, we create herd community, and where people we believe will look the same as us, we live in the same place. Then you start getting community of human species based on their similarities or features or common features. To create those community, it generates a certain logistic problem, as you can see, because communities increase consumption of goods and services, and of course that also will generate um, conflicts when there's not enough resources for everybody, especially food. um, we also want to avoid danger, especially at least things we perceive as danger, because of, again, instinct of survival. And then we also like to experience pleasure for different time or in different place. Also, the next thing is control. We like to keep control of what's happening, because that keep our anxiety level down. However, you have to keep in mind, as we experience those routines or those way of life or those attributes of life, they bring requirements to maintain it. For example, for the food, you need to start thinking about agriculture, growing foods to eat it, or you have to at least go and look for it, or you have to start creating something called hunting to feed your belly with with things that can continue to build muscle or maintain your muscle mass or what have you, giving you proteins and everything else. But even to maintain this network of resources and people, we create communication. And at first it was drums, and our body was the first drum, really, a bass, and then next thing you know, and there were different regular different sound that we've created and figured out to communicate different messages. Then construction became a necessity to um, to 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 really maintain shelter, because sometimes shelter needs, even if we could live inside of of a of a cave, really, but sometimes we have to actually accommodate or create that cave a bit. And that's all skills of construction starting to take shape. And before you know it, for pleasure, for control, for validation, even for feeding, we start creating craft, and those crafts become tools that allow us to get things done faster. And then comes games that we start building, and then sex, of course. It becomes like natural on day one that sex was something we need to do, because that's how we created more species and then populate our areas and reproduce. Of course, like I said, because of resources and logistics, conflicts are bound to happen. And then, of course, conflicts did happen and wars started. And to even maintain those wars, to maintain control, we also use conflicts and war. And then we started marking our territory again for all these course of life that I just mentioned on the left. Then we start thinking about territory, right? Meaning or land or city or place or forest or garden, or cattle even, or you know things that we mark as place. Then there was the identity, because remember, being similar to someone else started meaning a lot to us. How we create the herd, meaning the communities, that that also gave us a sense of ownership, including the objects, the groups, um, culture, really traditions, so on and so forth. All of these things became part of things we wanted to keep, and the need to keep them created a sense of ownership as we succeeded in doing that, including territories that we could mark, and we can go back to them and ensure that we can always continue to go back to them. And then next thing you know, or need for a higher purpose, or explaining to try to explain what we cannot explain, started to take shape of spiritual journeys. That's some part of the cost of living now, for you to understand how just living life started to create needs for resources. But let's talk about the 6 human needs according to a gentleman by the name of Tony Robbins. He's a New York Times best-selling author, also a very successful entrepreneur. And according to him, there are 6 human needs that you can always consider when you try to understand people. The first is certainty. They want to have the assurance that you can avoid pain and gain pleasure. So pleasure is fundamentally something that we humans want to experience, and for the same reason we want to avoid the pain. And where we can go and get the certainty that we're not going to suffer those pain, and then we're going to have pleasure instead and gain pleasure. And then the more certainty we have in that situation, the better we feel that our needs are met there. The second need is um, that makes sound a bit of countering the first one, where we need assurance and certainty, and this for the same reason. Second point is we also like to experience uncertainty. It means even when you provide that certainty, there must be a degree of surprise, a degree of changes. It cannot be just the same thing and predictable so much 100%, then it becomes boring and then you lose the people's attention. So we want to experience the different variety, even if it's the same thing, but at least we want some kind of variety to it. And then there's the significance to it, like the meaning of it, right? The more it is unique and important and special, the more we want it and need it. Then there's also the connection of love. That means we feel like we are better when we are needed and when we are appreciated by someone else. And then we also need to grow, and that's also part of the survival and preservation. Even if we don't survive by ourselves, we survive to our uh, creations or kids or babies. And also we want to belong in a way that we can contribute. We feel like we've contributed to something. Now, if you can understand those needs, you will realize that no matter at what level you look at men, there will be needs that are involved, and those needs will will be will be forcing us to behave different ways just to satisfy them. And those behavior, as I call them, the course of life, they create needs for resources, and those resources that we use to satisfy those needs, we preserve these resources in order for us to have a sense of control and a sense of certainty and a sense of assurance. To preserve, to acquire those resources and preserve those resources, we'll go the extra mile. We will give anything else we don't think we need at that time for us to satisfy those needs in the moment. Because of that process, we use value exchange system to satisfy our need continuously, and to satisfy our need continuously by using the value exchange system, we create the first form of money, which is a way to exchange value to satisfy our most inner needs or most deeply rooted needs or most basic needs. We will pay, or we will give, or we will get rid of other resources we don't think that's so needed or we think we have enough of for what we think we don't have. So those needs continue to be met every day so we can be happy. Now, this is how the process of cost of living happens, is that we need to satisfy those needs, and the cost is what we must give to get. So we give resources to get new resources that we can use to satisfy our needs. There wasn't money before as paper money that we see today. So we had different form of money. The first form of money we had to do that, which is a way to facilitate the exchange of those values. The first one we had in the prehistorical period is called barter. Barter is like a straight a direct exchange between two things of value, products or services. And we even today in modern society, we still do barter. But barter means you do something, I'll do something in return, so I don't feel like I owe you, or you don't feel like you've come out of your way to do more than needed. So it's fair. So it's called barter. And bartering started about over 10,000 years ago, BC. So barter is like, for example, back in the origin of times, let's imagine that I wanted to eat meat and you wanted to eat cereals, and I have cereals and you have meat. I would give you my cereal, you would give me your meat, and we are both happy. That's called bartering. But there was some limitation with bartering. Of course, it's called um, efficient exchange in terms of you having what I need and I don't have what you need, whereas you have what I need, but I don't like the amount that you have, or maybe the time that you can get me, I need it from I will get it from someone else. To solve these issues, men started to be creative and started to use cattle as a middle ground where I could totally need something else, but I give you cattle. I don't even, I didn't even, you don't even need my cattle, but you still take it because you can hold on to my cattle and use it later on to get something else. And cattle means anything that includes like cows, um, goats, anything really, lamb, all of these. I'll give camel, I'll give you my cattle or a certain amount of cattle or whatever, and then you give me something I wanted. For example, I may want a land, and you say, for you to get that land, you need to give me 100 cattle. And I say, okay, fine, here is 100 cattle. You don't need the 100 cattle, but you know it's something most people need these days. You hold on to your cattle, you give me the land, and then when comes the next person that needs that someday you might need something else, you give somebody else 100 those 100 cattle, or you might eat them yourself. You may eat them to satisfy your hunger. So cattle became a very good universal method to allow people to exchange value without going out of their way. Then cattle became a bit insufficient for logistic reasons, for safety reasons, for life cycle and many other good reasons. Because of that, especially in China, in 1200 BC, the Chinese invented a system called cowrie shells money system. What it is that you could literally go to the sea by the beach and collect cowrie shells, and then the amount that you have, you can use that as money. So based on what the person wants, you can give them a certain amount of them, and they'll give you different things you need. For example, they might give you other food, they might give you coconuts, they might give you banana, they might give plantains, they might give you so many other things. But you only need the cowrie shells. The one thing that cattle couldn't do that cowrie did is being easily transported because they are smaller, and also because they are like shells. They can last like 100 of years. So it allows people to hold on to their values for longer. Then there were metals. Metals are metals. So they were not like money yet. It was more like metals. Chinese again started with that system. They use metals for tools, for swords, for different arms, and different regular tools and crafts. So they would trade in those metals for other things of value. Meaning, remember, value is something that can satisfy one of those needs that we talk about. However, as we got closer to like less than 1,000 BC, as far as we're concerned, that's around the time historical period really era started to to be really documented as relevant. Then we started with the metallic money. The metallic money, by the way, I have to mention that the whole period from prehistorical period is the period where we look at most of those money, especially cattles down to metals that includes gold. They are considered as commodity money. Commodity money means you use a intermediary product that's not controlled by any company or any central authority, and that thing could be cattle, it could be shells, it could be metals, including gold or any other precious metal. And then we would use those metals to make payment for anything that any good or service we would like to acquire. However, when it comes to historical period, that's when you started to see a more definite expression of what money was supposed to be, where you have metallic money that started at year 550 BC by King Croesus of Lydia. During that time, money was now more of a definite form in terms of not only the shape of it, but also the nomination. Because at that time now you had pieces that has a certain amount of ounce of gold, a weight, and also a number that says how much it's worth, meaning units. That's when you started getting coins. And that was the first coin that was created. And then the Roman, the Greeks, they followed along. Next thing you know, the whole world followed suit, and all over the world, people were using coins, especially the Romans. Then, at a later time, in the ninth century, the Chinese again, they created the paper money. They had letter money before, but it wasn't really a very widely accepted and understood kind of currency, so it kind of died in between. But the real note that took shape is the paper money. And the paper money in the ninth century lasted about 500 years, where China had to stop because they were printing too much money around 1400. But until then, paper money was replacing metallic money, especially for traveling. It made it easier to count money by just using a representation of the same form of metallic money, but in form of notes that were written with specific instruction on how much they represent in terms of other object that supports them or back them. And speaking of which, England did about this a combination of that same uh, uh, concept, except that that was up to about 19. It's only 10 centuries later, after paper money became widely popular in Europe. They started facing the same problem China had, which is paper was not worth anything anymore, as much anymore, because there were too many papers being printed. Then in England in 1816, they started with the gold standard, where they have decided, instead of having just papers out there, we need to make sure that each paper represents a certain amount of gold. Where comes the word gold standard? And then, of course, as we evolved, end of 19th century, just a few dozen years later, banks started to create notes the same way as the government did. Private banks started to create their own notes, and they call them bank drafts or checks, what have you. And next thing you know, banks also started writing more notes to pay for merchandise, especially during the industrial boom, just to pay for big order that needed to be fulfilled right away. Banks would issue note that they didn't have reserve or gold reserve for, or the gold standard was not followed as closely. And of course, that drove, especially in the US, that drove the economy into a big depression of the 1930s, because at one point people realized that the banks could not pay for the notes that they promised. They lost faith in the bank, and everybody rushed to the bank early 20th century until until the economy went just down through the Great Depression. Now, history of money. Speaking of modern period now, after the Great Depression, there has been a lot of things that happened. At least the world went through two worldwide wars, first and second. Some people are afraid that if we even think or try the third one, there won't be us anymore. But that also came with some changes in terms of way society is, and of course the way we structure financial system. Usually in every country, especially more so now, every major country at least, there is a central bank, and the central bank basically control the flow of currency inside of the system. However, during the modern period, we started creating different things. Even banks, a central bank control, but couldn't fully 100% have a say on. Then you start using credit cards, and those credit cards become almost like money. Some banks gonna give you $10,000 in terms of credit cards or credit line, and you can use that card to make payment. Therefore, it becomes a plastic money. And there's also the digital currencies these days. If you have a wallet and you have Bitcoin or Ethereum, or especially ETH and Bitcoin, there are a lot of places right now that will accept these as cash or as a form of payment, making them money. And of course, for the same reason, you have decentralized finance that not only comes in the form of currencies, but also in the form of contracts, a token, and so many other forms and flavors that allow people now to use other systems outside of central bank to continue to explore different ways to pay, which is to exchange values. Now, what's the best way to define money, since we've had so many ways we looked into it in history? Let's look at the legal way to do it. The first way is to think of it as a legal tender. A legal tender, it's money that can be officially used in a country. Don't try to complicate it, it's very simple. According to Cambridge Dictionary, money is just something that is officially used. For example, in Canada, you have the dollar, the Canadian dollar. That's your legal tender in Canada. Or if you have a British pound, and the British pound is the legal tender because it's governed by the central bank of that country, and each country will have their own, or sometimes even region, like in the case of Europe, where you have euro. But there is also a central bank involved to control that money, and that makes it a legal tender. A legal tender is a type of money that must be used if someone offers you that. You cannot say you don't accept that kind of payment in exchange for the service or good that you are offering to settle the debt in exchange for that service or good. Non-legal tender is a slight variation of legal tender. This is an alternative to official currency that can be accepted as a term of payment or form of payment although not required. That means, on contrary to legal tender, where if someone say, I'm gonna pay you cash, you must accept, unless you have another alternative that you can agree with that person, but cash would be just enough. The non-legal tender is an alternative to official currency that can be accepted as a form of payment. As an alternative, you don't have to. You could accept or not accept it, but it's not required. Those are bills of exchange, bank drafts, postal orders, and check. So you write a check to somebody, it's money, but it's a non-legal tender, meaning they don't have to accept it. Someone might say, I don't accept check, and there's nothing you can do about it. But it is money, but not a legal tender. In modern period, you have plastic money, digital currencies, digital finance, right? Now, the function of money. There are several functions of money, and as there are four of them. The first one is money is a medium of exchange. What this means is that when you have anything of value, whether it's in the form of a service or goods, and you want to have something else in exchange for what you have, you could use your money as an alternative to facilitate that exchange. Whereas I'm gonna give you, I want, for example, let's say I have a car and I want to get another car. What I can do, or I just want to get rid of it. The first thing I want to do for you to get that car, you're gonna give me money. And that money, once you give it to me, it satisfies my requirement. If I said $4,000, once I get that $4,000, I release the title to you. The $4,000 became the medium that allowed me to exchange my car from me as the owner to you now as the owner. Measure of value. If you look at money, you will see that they have different nomination, and those numbers allow you to measure how much you are paying for what. And the measure of value will determine um, how you are paying. For example, the $4,000, how do I know it's $4,000? Money will allow you to measure that by giving you different denominations, whether it's $100, a $20 bill, or $50 bill. When you combine them together and you add them up, it gives you $4,000 once you count it. You know, when you count your money, right? When you count it, it gives you $4,000, and the measure is balanced, then it gives us a pretty accurate sense of trading, meaning you know you're giving exactly the amount of value you should give and nothing more. Standard of payments. You might want a payment now, you might want a payment tomorrow, you might want a payment in a year, you might want a payment in 10 years. Regardless of when you want it, money allows you to have a set number that is settled easily, as opposed to if you had to wait and then something else had to change, or something might not be the same anymore, then you wouldn't be able to really find a good equivalent for it. But because of the standard of payments, $100 today, $100 in a year. If you said it's $100, I'll pay you $100 tomorrow. If you give me up to a year to give you $1,000, whether I give it to you today or whether I give it to you in a year, it doesn't matter, as long as you get your $1,000. It That's what it is. So the standard of payment is defined that way, in a sense that it allows you to settle that payment, whether it's in the now or in the future. It doesn't matter, but you still have the same amount on paper, or whatever we agreed on, it remains the same payment, the same amount. Store of value is, in that sense, money is a store of value because it allows you to keep the value that you have accumulated in terms of capital in a form that you can protect because of weather condition, because of risk, different kind of risk management, because of ways things can deteriorate over time, because of physical challenges and what have you. You might have something and then you lose it over time. But money, what it does, it allows you to keep it in a standard number that you can measure and continue to use as such. For instance, you could have 100 um, gallon of milk, and that milk expire after 15 days. After 15 days, if you have 100 gallons of milk and all the milk expired, you lost all your money because the milk expired. However, when it comes to money, if you sold them today at $2 and you had 100 of them and you sell them at $2, you get $200. You put that $200 in the bank or in your pocket or wherever it is. 2 years later, you still have $200. 10 years later, you still have $200. It might not be worth the same in terms of inflation, but the amount, the denomination itself remain the same. So it allows you to store values. Values meaning capital of different things of value that you have. You can now store them by converting them into cash. And the good news about cash is once you convert it into cash, you can turn it into the value back at any given time by just buying it again using that cash. And that cash is easy to use because everybody can use it the same way. So, in other words, tonight what we've seen that in order for us to understand the financial market, you need to understand a few things, and one of them is money. And money is not easy to understand unless you understand the needs that you will satisfy that creates the needs for money. And to understand needs, you need to understand human nature in itself at its very basic state to understand where those needs come from and why do they exist. And once you understand those, it allows you now to understand why we behave a certain way, and those behavior creates a series of resource needs, and those resources will give something else in terms of resources or something of value in exchange for that, for whatever we need. And as we give that resource, the best way to facilitate those exchanges is money, and also to measure it to know how much is that as money, and also to ensure that we can still pay at a later time instead of specific time only. Money allows us to continue traveling through time to get the right number, and of course store value, preserve it. So whether it was back in the prehistorical period or the historical period or modern time, money has been and always remained the same. It will be a good instrument to allow people to store their capital values, and in very simple and easy way, as a way to make life better. Thanks.